Hey guys, it's me once again. If you were following what happened last Monday, I wasn't able to come on the podcast, and I kind of pre-warned everybody that I'm not going to be on Thursday's episode as well. And as Thursday has already passed, that episode came out and I was not on it. I put out a little video earlier that gave all my thoughts on all the topics that we talked about on Monday's episode, just with me alone, and I got a good response from it. And everybody wanted me to do it again for the other episode that I was missing, especially since it was a deep dive into like force powers and things like that. So I'm here to do that again. And I'm going to try to blow through the Will of the Force stuff as quickly as I can, just so that we can get to that later topic, which was the big discussion of the week. So I'm going to just get through it real quick here. Let's see. We got the first one is, will The Mandalorian be released with a single long-form story spread across 10 episodes, or will it be separate adventures throughout the way? And I definitely think that it's going to be a long-form story. I've been sold on that for a while. I think the one that has the more likely chance of being separate adventures would be the Cassian Andor story, because I think it would be fun to just kind of see him like Indiana Jones-ish, if you will. Kind of like, oh, today we're going on this mission, then we're doing this, and maybe like a larger overarching story, like maybe it is in a timeline order, as opposed to like totally like the Clone Wars, how they were just told like out of order, like, oh, here's an adventure. But I do think that it's likely The Mandalorian's going to be one story. Will Nick Nolte, the next question, have a major role in The Mandalorian? What's a major role? You know, I think he'll be in a number of episodes, a good number of episodes, and his character will be looked at as someone who has some sort of importance. I can't imagine that you go out and get Nick Nolte and just do nothing with him. So I would say yes, major role. He's one of the first announced, pretty much. So you got to think it's pretty major. Upcoming Thrawn novel. Are we going to get any implications on what happened between Thrawn and Ezra? Well, simply put, the book takes place before all that happened. So you have to imagine that when Rebels was happening, that Thrawn didn't know what was going to happen with him and Ezra. So before then, I can't like Ezra had the upper hand in that. So it wasn't like we find out that Thrawn pre-planned that Ezra was going to do all that, and so therefore he knew that the Purrgil would take him to a specific spot. Like, that just seems all crazy. I definitely think Ezra had the upper hand. He overcame and outsmarted, defeated Thrawn, and now Thrawn is currently, as far as we're aware, at his mercy. So I think that's the last bit of information we have of that, and this new book is just going to be its own story, just the same way that Thrawn and Thrawn Alliances both took place around the Rebels era, if you will, but it really didn't conflict too much with what was going on in the story. They were both kind of just standalone stories on their own, especially since Thrawn Alliance was like, we're going to pull you away. But what about the Rebels over there? And no. I'm pulling you away from that. Go do this other thing, and then you can go back to what you were doing. So here we got, do we think there's going to be any episode 9 footage shown this month? This month being December, and I say no. I say that's not happening. I could always be wrong. I almost kind of want to be wrong, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter to me, because the movie comes out in December. So if you show me the footage in December, that means we're not getting footage in January. And if you don't show footage in December, it's more likely we're going to get footage in January. So either way, I mean, I guess you could say the sooner the better, but the sooner the footage comes out, it just means the longer wait. So what's the real game you're trying to play? Usually putting out footage closer to the movie is a better game to play. So I still think they're going to show footage, or we're going to get the title in January, and then we might not even get footage until Celebration. So no footage this month. And the last question was, will Lando Calrissian have more than 5 minutes on screen in episode 9? And I also say no to that because he was only in Return of the Jedi for 5 minutes and 15 seconds. So you have to assume that while I do think that episode 9 is going to be longer than Return of the Jedi was as a runtime, I don't think that Lando Calrissian is going to be as strong of a character as he even was in Return of the Jedi, which means I just don't think, I think 5 minutes is a lot. And we talked about that on something you haven't seen yet, but we've really got into the deep dive on how long screen time actually is in a movie, and sometimes a character who has big, strong relevance in that movie can come across like he has a lot of screen time, or he has a big importance in that role. But remember, like Last Jedi, for instance, like Rose and Kylo Ren both had almost the same amount of screen time. So it's just kind of like, but we think of Last Jedi as like Ben Solo's movie, you know. But anyway. I digress. I don't think he's going to have much longer than that. So even though I've already been, talking to him for like 5 or 6 minutes or something like that, I'm going to try to get to that discussion. So the big thing here is how much is too much when it comes to force powers? Is there ever going to be like a cap? Do we ever think that there's going to be a point where we're throwing planets at each other, willy-nilly, like snap, the planets and half the galaxy's gone, or something like that. And one thing I noticed, I went through the episode and I kind of made a couple key points. One thing I noticed Lacey said right at the beginning is we could potentially run into a situation where, well, why didn't they just do that before? And that's I think the key to this whole thing. And I think when I get to the very end of this, I'll kind of wrap up the whole idea. But for one thing, I think that we forget that sometimes powers didn't exist at the time, so that wasn't really a possibility. So say say Rey was able to pull a Star Destroyer out of the sky in episode 9. Well, why didn't she do that in 8? Well, she didn't have the power then. She had it in 9. She gained the power in 9. Well, why didn't Luke do it when he was over here in the original trilogy? Because he didn't have the ability to do it. Rey has obtained the ability to do it in episode 9. So that kind of logic does make sense to me. Another one was, and this is great, there was the Star Wars Fan Awards recently. And they one of the videos was the like best comedy or something. It was called More Machine Than Man. And they made a joke in there, which technically is not true, but it's funny, but it's not true. He was talking about how Luke was talking to Obi-Wan when he was a Force ghost. And he's like, I don't know. I kind of left Anakin there. I thought he would disappear. That's what Jedi do, right? When Jedi die, they normally disappear. And I was like, well, they don't really. You were the first person to do that. After Qui-Gon died, he didn't disappear, but he was able to like figure out what it meant to become part of the living force. So he kind of taught that to Obi-Wan, which then Obi-Wan, since he had the ability, he did disappear, and he didn't disappear when he died. He disappeared when he like voluntarily died before he could be killed, if you will. And maybe that's up to interpretation, but regardless, Obi-Wan taught what he knew to Yoda, and Yoda disappeared when he died. And all of them, I assume, taught that ability over the time to Luke, and Luke was able to disappear. So now it feels like Jedi disappear when they die, but there's plenty of accounts throughout the Clone Wars animated series where characters didn't die. I'm getting really off topic, but the point is here that I think if they want to go down a route where they're saying, hey, this is the most powerful Jedi that's ever existed, well, why didn't they do that stuff before? Because this is now the most powerful Jedi that's ever existed. So we've never seen stuff like this before. Okay. John also points out too, at some point in this discussion, that Luke coming back in episode 9 to kick everyone's butt as a Force ghost would kind of downplay his death. I 100% agree with that. He basically, if they wanted to do that, he becomes indestructible because he's already dead. You know what I mean? He becomes this Jedi now that could just like, oh, you're swinging at me? Oh, it doesn't even, it goes through me, you know, or I disappear. Now I'm behind you. There's a whole bunch of like weird things that they could do with that. And maybe after you die and you see the living Force, your faith grows and you're deeper into this and you could do really, really crazy stuff. I think they want to stay away from the Force ghost aspect of it. Not to say that he couldn't come back in like a physical form. I've talked about that before. I think that's possible too, but I really don't think that the story in the long run is going to be, now that Jedi have the ability to come back, ever since, you know, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Yoda and all these characters have mastered the ability to do that, then we can just have them forever doing whatever they want, and they're indestructible and they're going to save the whole galaxy. I think they need to, or they're in the process of writing the narrative to explain away why the Force ghosts don't come back and just save the galaxy every single time. So that is that as well. And I think that's part of this conversation of trying to keep the Force in a sort of checks and balance, so that it doesn't ever get too powered, because you have ghosts, indestructible undead ghosts that could do anything they want. You know, they could just walk into the First Order base and they could control matter enough, you know what I mean, to start striking lightning down and stuff. That's unreal, and they're not going to do that. We know they're not going to do that because that's not Star Wars anymore. Lacey also makes the comparison too, that, you know, like in the X-Men, for instance, like you have a character that's really powerful, and you have another one who's able to defeat that person just because it's kind of the checks and balances. Like, he may be really powerful over this person, but not this person. And I think that's smart, and I think that's kind of how they do it in Star Wars as well, even though it doesn't seem as obvious. So it's kind of like a big game of rock, paper, scissors. Like, you have Rockman, and he's really strong, and he could defeat Scissor Man no problem. I know it kind of sounds like I'm talking about Mega Man, but he could defeat Scissor Man really easy. But if Paperman shows up, Paperman would be able to defeat Rockman. You get where I'm going with this. And this has actually already happened. In Return of the Jedi, we have Luke, who clearly is stronger than Darth Vader, and beat him, defeated him, cut off his hand, and that was it. Threw down his weapon. He says, I've won, but I'm not going to kill you, right? 5 seconds later, Palpatine comes along and goes, boom, and totally knocks down Luke, gets him, defeats him. There's no coming back. Luke's losing this fight, right? So Luke is stronger than Vader. Palpatine's stronger than Luke. But who defeats Palpatine? Vader. So it's this rock, paper, scissors game that they're playing, where for whatever reason now they showcase how strong Vader is because he's able to defeat Palpatine. And I think the core of it is this kind of understanding that we're always trying to figure out who's stronger based on power level. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I wanted to talk about if I even think the idea of this is cool. So in the original trilogy, there wasn't a lot of abilities shown. They were kind of throwing some objects around. You know, Yoda moves the starship, the X-Wing fighter, stuff like that. But in the prequels, we actually see a lot of powers, and especially in the Clone Wars, I mean, these guys are jumping way beyond their heights. They're jumping off cliffs. They're landing on their feet. They're doing all sorts of crazy stuff. They're moving like very large objects. One thing that's interesting about all that is that at that time, they still kind of look at Anakin as one of the most powerful Jedis ever. So, you know, the midichlorian count says that Anakin has even more so than Master Yoda. So does that mean that Anakin is stronger than Master Yoda, this comes back to the power level aspect. I really don't think so. I think that Star Wars is very wise at making their decisions of who can defeat who based on things like wisdom or things, I don't know, things like seniority. They often will show the checks and balances in sense of like, Mace Windu is more powerful and he's wiser. He's a stronger Jedi as a whole than Anakin Skywalker. But in an instant, and I think it's just because in that one particular moment, he manages to take advantage of Mace Windu and he was able to defeat him because he cuts off his hand. I know Palpatine is the person who kills him, but really, in all honesty, it was Anakin stepping in that caused that to happen, which led to Mace Windu's defeat. And if Anakin is weaker than Mace Windu, how did that happen? But it happens because life happens. It doesn't matter how big a dude is that could totally crush me in a fist fight. If I use a weapon to kill him, I defeated him. So I think that's kind of how Star Wars does the checks and balances thing. And I think that you have you actually do have some examples sometimes of characters who utilize very strong powers that don't get referenced later. Yeah, I'll mention one. I'll mention one that is not really canon, let's say, but there is a canon book called Legends of Luke Skywalker, and the way they kind of treat it is they say some of these stories may or may not be true. And one of the stories in that book is that Luke actually was on Jakku during the Battle of Jakku, and he did bring down a Star Destroyer, but that story may not be true. But let's get to other ones that are true. We have this was kind of off the top of my head. I was trying to think of some of the most powerful things, and I want you guys to put other examples that I may have missed in the comments, because I'm sure there's tons of like canon examples where, you know, a character did this and it was like really, really powerful. But the two that popped out to me were Yoda in the comics was able to overcome a mountain that was like a living force mountain, and they don't really like show the two clashing necessarily, but we know Yoda lives. We know that the characters that were in the story made it out, and as the story is kind of leading up, it's Yoda saying, I have to do this because I'm courageous and this is the right thing to do. I'm going to go take on the mountain. And the mountain is standing there saying, you're less than a bug to me. I'm going to crush you. There's no way that you can stand up to me. And yet Yoda knows that the Force as a whole and the ability to wield the Force as a weapon, so to speak, is the Force is my ally kind of thing. The Force is bigger than this mountain. And it will always be bigger than that mountain. It will always be bigger than the planet. It will always be bigger than that Star Destroyer over there. And if the Force is your ally, then you have an ally that could wield those tiny, relatively tiny objects like a planet. So I really do believe that when it comes to how to utilize the Force, it's based kind of in a religious sense. It depends on your faith. It depends on how much you believe it to be real. And that's the struggle with Luke in the original trilogy. He doesn't believe that it's possible, so therefore it doesn't work for him. But the more you dive deeper into the understanding and you believe what you see and you believe that it's possible, those things can become a reality because you're diving into the whole structure of the Force, which is a truly religious thing. You know, you have to have faith in order to move mountains, right? Anyway, getting to the point is, I think that at the core of it, to say that a character should not be able to do these certain things. I think that fights against what the original trilogy even set up. Size matters not. It doesn't matter. If you have the Force as an ally, the Force is this big thing. It can do whatever it wants. You have the ability to work with it, and you're not lifting. The crude matter doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The point is that if you are one with the Force can lift, or the Force can move whatever you need it to move. It's almost like saying, I have the ability to move water. So whenever I go to a lake, I can like splash my friends by just asking the water to do it. But does that mean that I could move all the waters in the ocean? I understand it's like, well, that's a lot of water. I don't know if I could move that much, but it's like, but at the core of your power is I have the ability to move water. So if you have the ability to move water, there's no limitation there. I move all of the water, and all of the water in all of the oceans could easily crush or destroy anything. So if you have the ability to move water, you have the ability to do whatever you want with that water. The limitation is to the power itself, and I believe that the Force is all powerful. Wow, we are getting to some crazy stuff here. One other one too, just because I have it written down, is that one time Darth Vader actually stops an AT-AT from stomping on him. So that's pretty powerful too. I don't know if that is as strong as bringing down a Star Destroyer. Probably not, but it is a large display of power that's based on his faith. It's coming down on him, and he goes, oh, I know how to do this. It's not a physical muscle, more it's a mental muscle. And because he believes so strongly that he just needs to stop this from happening, he just lifts up his hands and he stops it from happening. So boom, there you go. That's another example of some crazy example of Force powers. But what's interesting about both of those events, the Yoda and the Mountain, the Darth Vader and the AT-AT, is both of those happened. Well, there's a weird technicality here, but just bear with me. Both of those things happened before the original trilogy. So even though Darth Vader had the ability to like do crazy stuff, like, I don't know, like block an AT-AT or whatever, he's still just like defeating Luke or trying to defeat Luke by just using his lightsaber. I think at that point, if Darth Vader was able to really do what he has done in other things, and I don't think this is a problem with the story, I think this is just a way of explaining, I'm going up against an enemy that is just as powerful as I am, so therefore tricks like that aren't really going to work. They kind of worked when he was younger and we were on Bespin and I could throw stuff at him. But at this point, I don't really know if that's going to work. And I'm sure somebody could probably come up with a better example, but I'm trying to stick to the movies because I think people are more welcome to there being crazy stuff in the comics than they would in the movies. But are we going to see stuff like this in other series? I think it's possible that that maybe at one point, like say they do like an Old Republic thing and Benioff and Weiss say, hey, we want this thing to be like wild and crazy. We want people throwing planets and stuff, whatever. I think it's possible that they could explain, hey, this is what the Force was. And the reason it isn't that anymore is because it got out of control. It kind of like roamed itself and it got too big, too powerful. And then maybe that's when Darth Bane steps in and goes, none of this stuff is working. Like we have all these people that can just do whatever the heck they want. It's not working. This isn't the way we should be utilizing the Force or something like that. So I'm going to use every ability I can to kill all the people who are able to wield this power. And then kind of like I can't think of what his character's name is, but Chiwetel Ejiofor and Doctor Strange, he comes in and he says the problem is there's too many wizards. Like we need to stop trying to wield this power the way it is. So a character like Darth Bane could come in and say it's getting too ridiculous. There's too much stuff going on. get rid of all this. And if a character like that was successful and he really did get it down to like 2 people, rule of 2 kind of thing, maybe we're just seeing the aftermath of that, where it's like the Sith have never been able to get that strong again, just simply because there was once a time when all that stuff was real, but it has fundamentally kind of got wiped out. So I think that is also a possibility, that if they wanted to do that in the past and they said, hey, here's the visual spectacle of what the Star Wars stuff were. I mean, we even kind of slightly see that in the Clone Wars and the prequels. Like, the Jedi had more abilities than you kind of saw in the original trilogy, and they come up with a way to explain it, because then all the Jedi were defeated and it wasn't really using the Force the correct way. And you get what I'm trying to say. So maybe if we go back far enough, maybe they really were doing some crazy stuff with the Force, and then now they're going to kind of say that that all got put to an end. The last thing, like I was alluding to earlier, is we're always trying to seek that like power level. Well, if he was able to defeat him and he was able to defeat him, then he should be able to defeat him, because obviously. But I think there's all these little things that we forget about. And I am a big Dragon Ball Z fan, and you wouldn't believe how big of an argument this is in Dragon Ball Z, because this character will power up to Super Saiyan level 3, and then because he's in Super Saiyan level 3, he should be able to defeat this guy, but that guy was able to defeat him. And it doesn't make any sense, because we even have numbers to it, 1, 2, and 3, and it doesn't make sense. And I think Dragon Ball also kind of does the same thing of just saying like, hey, it's not about the power, it's just about, like, in this instance, if this person said, I'm gonna make myself 10 times more powerful than I was before, and somebody was still able to defeat them, that just goes to show that that person was stronger at that moment. For whatever reason, they were able to overcome that power, and it just made them in an instant, maybe like some sort of boost or something. But they just kind of like explain it as it's so, in a way, they kind of tell the story in a way that it's not about who is stronger, but just who was able to defeat who in that moment. Going back to like the wrestler and MMA fighter that I use like a gun to shoot, because I could defeat them in an instant, even though there's no way realistically like I have the power to defeat that person, but I kind of do because I utilize my surroundings or something. I hope a lot of this is coming off like I'm not just rambling and going from thing to thing, but it's kind of making sense. The biggest question, though, the final question, I think, is, am I for it? Do I want to see this happen? And the easy answer out of it is it depends on how they do it. I think that what was neat about the game, The Force Unleashed, is just how the character was doing those things within the context of the game, and I guess kind of how he made it look simple. I don't know, it's kind of tricky. He made it look simple, but other times he made it look hard. So he's just like throwing large objects at things, like he's pulling down TIE fighters and stuff. But then when it got to the really big stuff, he was like really struggling, and he's pulling it down, and he has to do all this stuff. And I think if it were Yoda and Yoda needed to bring it down, I don't think Yoda would struggle so much. You know, I know he struggled when like Dooku throws something at him and he's like, ugh, and he kind of moves it out of the way and stuff. But I think that the cool thing about the Force is that, like I was saying before, that if somebody really needed to move a large object, the biggest testament to them being able to do it would be everything that we know about that character beforehand. So watching that character come to the realization that he is just one small part of the bigger force, and he could see something coming towards him, and he would have the faith to do what he needs to do to close his eyes and just like put his hands together or put him up, and it causes that thing to move over. That's more, it's not so much like a testament of strength. It's a testament of like ability and faith. And if we believe everything that we've been told about what the Force is, going all the way back to Obi-Wan explaining it to Luke on Tatooine, then yes, I do think it's possible, and it could be something really cool to see. But every director and every writer that they're hiring now does really respect and love Star Wars. And I don't think that while that may be something that's really cool and really true and really possible in the Star Wars world, I think they also kind of respect the reality of, we just want to see these people be strong and know that they're strong, but still have like realistic fights. So I think they're going to do that kind of like that Dragon Ball Z thing, which is like, maybe in one instance of the movie, we show a character do something really powerful, but then later in that movie, when it comes to that final battle, it's not such a spectacle, but it's more just like those two going at it. So in the reference to episode 9, it would be really cool to see Rey move a very large object or do something that is faith-based, although I really don't think she could have achieved that in that amount of time. I do think that Rey is more open to the Force and believing that than Luke ever was, which is why she was able to move so much quicker, because, you know, she was physically fit and she was like searching for hope, whereas Luke was like, he was searching for adventure and a very material human thing. And I think Rey, while she was searching for her family and stuff, she was open to the possibilities of like so much more, especially when she's hearing stories about like the myth that is Luke Skywalker and stuff. So I don't know. Getting into all that, I think it'd be really cool to see her be able to do something crazy, or Kylo Ren be able to do something crazy. But when it comes to that final battle, I don't know that I necessarily would think that they'd go the route of like being able to lift or move heavy objects, because I think they want that battle to be personal. There it is. Okay, so I hope I covered everything, and I hope I didn't go too long, too crazy. I hope that people actually enjoy kind of listening to this. I hope it makes sense what I'm trying to say. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff in there that people are like, no, you're way off the mark. If you guys want to put that stuff in the comments, that's fine. I'll try to respond as best I can. You can hit me up on Twitter, which is, Twitter at MyraTrunks, MyraTrunks. You can just send us questions. If you're part of the Patreon, you can hit me up in the group chat, or you could post it in the comments here. Just in any way possible, share your feelings, good, bad, whatever you think. If you think I'm way off the mark, if you think I'm totally nailing it, yes, I'm glad you said it. This is exactly how I've been picturing it in my head, or wow, I've never thought of it that way. Whatever your feelings are, I want to see them in the comments, because I want to open up that conversation a little bit. I love the deep dive. I think that stuff is really fun. I think that's why we all do it. I don't think most of us here who would be watching videos on YouTube about Star Wars would be the type of person that would just be here simply for the surfacey stuff. I think we're all trying to deep dive. So, all right, you know what to do. Hit up the comments, blow it up, do whatever. Snap your fingers, blow it up. I'm just kidding. And I will see you guys on Monday's episode of the Resistance Broadcast. See you later.